So, again, to lay the framework, this group of people online figured out where the GPS solve was, and the guy who cracked the code, cracked the GPS solve, was part of that group, but so he is the finder. But he and a couple of friends who cracked it, they didn't give any credit to the other people online who had been helping him figure it out. And this guy, who is one of those people, is irritated. So he contacts Mike Cowling a week before the finder writes the article on medium.com. Now, again, this is Mike Cowling's story. It's just Mike. Mike said this guy contacted him and gave him this location. How does he have the location? I don't know. I guess he was told by the writer finder. But anyway, supposedly he tells Mike a week before the article comes out on medium.com that it's going to come out. He knows the finder. That's his story. The story of the guy Mike Cowling says exists. Here's the thing. There's no confirmation of that. I mean, really, it just comes down to Mike Cowling. Mike Cowling is saying that someone contacted him a week before the finder wrote the article, the writer finder wrote the article on medium.com, contacted him a week before, and so that is proof to Mike that the guy who contacted him a week before does know the finder, because he knew the article was going to be written a week later, and then lo and behold, it came out a week later. But that's just Mike Cowling telling us that. Could be true, in my opinion. I don't know. It's again one of those things where there's no confirmation. I really like confirmation. I like to know that things I'm told to believe are real. And if I have to go investigate those particular things to find out if they're real or not, I'll do it in most cases. I'm one of those people that often checks on the internet things that I read about politics and all sorts of things. And it's amazing how often you're being sold a false story. And by any number of different people, for any number of different reasons. And all you have to do is go look it up, and you go look it up and you go, wow, that guy lied to me. He made an agenda-driven point. And I just searched a little and figured out he was wrong, or she was wrong. Here's something I really think is interesting to think about with this concept that a guy who helped find the finder, I will say the finder for this particular point. If this guy really worked online to help the finder find the GPS location, and then the finder and a few friends found it later and didn't give any credit to him and aren't going to cut him in on the spoils of finding the treasure, his way of getting back, which is what he says, his way of getting back against the finder is to reveal the location that now is irrelevant because the chest has already been picked up by the finder. Do you see anything funny about that? Because I can tell you what I would do, and I've often found that in life, it's really good from a point of view of trying to figure things out. It's often very good to just put yourself in the place of the other person. So I put myself in the place of this other person. I thought, what would I do? What would I do? Okay, I would give out the location. Then I thought, wait a minute. I want to get back at the finder, the writer finder. I want to get back at the guy who wrote the medium.com article who has a treasure chest that I should have gotten a part of it. I want to get back at him, and I'm going to just tell someone the GPS solve and the location after the fact, after the treasure's been found and taken. What good is that going to do? It very quickly occurred to me, why wouldn't I give up the identity of the finder? This supposed finder that wrote this article. Wouldn't that be the smart thing to do? Think about it. I mean, if this guy has really screwed you over to the point where you're trying to get back at him, the best you can think of is, gee, what do I know he really, really, really doesn't want known? He doesn't want the location known. Oh, and I would think more importantly, he doesn't want his identification known. He doesn't give up the identity. He doesn't give up the identity. Doesn't make any sense. Of course you're going to give up the identity. I mean, a lot of good it didn't give the location up, if that's a true story, because he certainly doesn't. I haven't heard anything about any more about this guy got anything for his effort. You would think telling the guy you're going to disclose his identity would get you a little chunk of the treasure, if that's what you're really trying to do. Kind of obvious, right? Can't confirm any of this. That part right there makes me question the entire story. This entire story about Mike Callan being... I mean, I'm not saying Mike Callan's lying. Maybe someone contacted him, and maybe the guy who wrote the article is the same guy who contacted Mike Callan, right? And it's all just made up. He contacts Mike Callan, and he says, you know what, in about a week, this guy that I know who screwed me out of the treasure, he's going to be writing an article. He's going to say he's the finder. Yeah, he's the finder, but I don't like him. He didn't give me any credit or any money from the treasure chest, and I helped him find it. And that's going to be in a week. You're going to see that. And sure enough, it turns up in a week. Well, maybe they're the same guy. Maybe he's the guy that writes the finder article. Maybe. But again, we don't even know this guy actually contacted Mike Callan. Mike Callan said he did. Who knows? Again, can't confirm it. So anyway, you all know the rest of the story. Posey, this guy named Justin Posey, he hears about this. This is where it gets pretty funny. Funnier. Thor shows Posey, and you got the whole group out there. You got Meacham, you got Posey, you got Mike, and you got Christy, Thor, K-Pro. What's happened is the source that talked to Mike provided pictures of the location, the area, where the treasure had supposedly been found prior. One was a shot of the area, a cathedral of soaring lodgepole pines, and the other two were of the place on the ground where he claimed the chest had been. The next morning, a Monday, Posey, Thor, and Meacham drove into the park in Posey's truck on what they were calling Operation Nook. They parked at DeLacy Creek picnic area, began a short hike along a nearby trail, then hopped over a small creek and walked through a meadow into a copse. It's the kind of area I'm always looking for, Posey says, less than a mile to walk. No elevation, very simple, approachable. There's a physical boundary in the form of a water crossing. It's simple, but deters a lot of people. That lets you go from a populated area to a very private place quickly. You know, it's almost as if he says there's a form of water crossing. It's simple, but deters a lot of people. Why? I guess it's to explain why no one else had found it all this time. I guess that's what he's trying to do. Very careful. Anyway, the first day doesn't go that well, and then the first day of searching, they were ill-prepared and gave up after a few hours. That night, Justin Posey began to have doubts that the solve was authentic. But he spoke to a friend in Austin, an applied mathematician, who pointed out the extraordinary unlikelihood that Out of the effectively infinite geographic coordinates in the world, a set of digits derived from number homophones in the order in which they appeared in the poem would yield a location that happened to be within Fenn's search area. Well, Fenn's search area is the Rocky Mountains and transcends 4 states, so it's not like it's a little area. The next day, the group returned to the site to search again. Several hours in, Thor walked up to Posey, wanting to show him a picture of an elk carcass she had just taken. Woohoo! As he moved toward her, he suddenly stopped and said, "Wait, wait." A minute of silence passed as he studied the area around them. "I found it," he said. "It's right here." Thor looked around. "I don't see a downed pine." You know, when I've been out in the woods, it's hard not to see a downed pine. And I realize we're looking for a pine because of supposedly the picture, and maybe, remember Forrest Fenn said I'd like to lay up against a pine tree and all that crap. It's not really crappy, you know what I'm saying. But it's so... Then they saw the downed pine. He pointed to the deteriorated remains of a tree on the ground. She began to shout, "Fuck yeah, we found it!" She radioed Cynthia Meacham, who thought she was joking, and said, "You're so fucking full of shit." Only when Posey got on the radio did Meacham realize Thor was serious. Thank you, Thor. Is my yelling getting your little cat brain going? Thor was serious. Meacham started running. When she reached them, she just stood there, filled with relief. Stop it. It's over. I mean, can you see the drama? The drama is just incredible, the way it's built up in this article. Filled with relief. What are you doing, buddy? You're a good boy. Posey began scrutinizing the ground for confirmation. Pine cones, pine needles, deciduous leaves, twigs with specific shapes. Twigs with specific shapes. He's like, see that twig? I think we found it. There was nothing that doesn't line up with the original photo, he says. I mean, come on. All right, and then they go on to tell the ridiculous story of Tucker, the bronze-sniffing dog. Then they have a dog. I'm not making this up. For those of you that haven't read this article or don't know the GPS solution, Justin Posey has trained his dog Tucker to sniff bronze. Now, this is not a joke. People do train animals, dogs specifically, to be able to sniff all sorts of things. Do you know that they actually found the FBI, and I think it's the FBI, that in cases of smuggling, they had, one of the things they were finding as they went on in that field of endeavor to crack cases was SIM chips. You know, little SIM chips you can put a bunch of photos on or data or whatever. And they were finding that these SIM chips were often things they needed to locate when they busted people, and they trained dogs to be able to sniff out SIM chips in people's homes and stuff. Isn't that wild? And they did it. And it's been a successful thing for them to find SIM chips, little plastic, metallic chips. So anyway, you know the story. Tucker is taught how to smell bronze, and he Cynthia goes in. She says, not Cynthia. K-Pro is so worried about breaking the rules and having a dog in the park. They go in and get a handful of dirt. I mean, I'm not making this up. And they take the handful of dirt from where they think the chest had been because they found the location. And they go out, and Tucker the dog smells the handful of dirt that and sits down, which tells them that it has bronze stuff in it. And so they were able to figure that out. I don't, that whole part I just thought was so ridiculous. It wasn't even, but again, I know they can I know they can get dogs to really sniff out stuff. There's not a doubt about that. Not a doubt about that. Okay, folks, so that's my take on the whole thing, is that it cannot be confirmed. All right? None of this can be confirmed. It's a nice story. You come up with this GPS solve idea, and, you know, I guess you talk about it for a couple of few videos, and then what? Then it goes away. I would assume, because who cares? There's nothing there anyway. The treasure chest is gone. Like I said, this is how this guy got back at the finder, the writer finder. This guy who was miffed that he wasn't part of the proceeds from the treasure chest, he gets back at them by giving up the location that we can't confirm. How about giving us the identity if you're out there? How about giving us the identity of the guy who wrote the article on medium.com that you claim you know? You, buddy out there that contacted Mike Calling, or Mike Calling, why don't you get this guy to give up the identity? Would you please? I'm sure this has probably been discussed on their channel, and I don't watch their channel as a rule until people point me towards it. I used to always watch when Forrest Fenn was interviewed, though. That I would do. But now, it's over. For me, it's over, except for figuring out what's really going on with the real life machinations of where the chest is and who has the chest and who really is the finder, etc. That kind of stuff to me is really interesting. Coming up with fake locations to keep talking about, you know. I know a lot of people are still into the solvent stuff. But I want to make my point about the fact that Forrest Fenn always told us that what's up, buddy? I want to make my point about Forrest Fenn always telling us you had to follow the clues, right? That was what, when I got into the chase, I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the way I was going to find the treasure was I was going to read the poem, begin at where warm waters halt, and take it in the canyon down, because he said start at begin at where warm waters halt. And I was going to go from location to location to location, determined from the geographical points he was describing in the poem. And that's how I was going to find the treasure. That's how we all thought you were supposed to find the treasure. And now we're told this GPS location comes along that totally blows that out of the water. Now it's just that you determine numbers in the poem and you figure out the intersection, right? The intersection on the map somewhere. And it doesn't matter what the geography is. That GPS location can be a mountaintop, it can be at the bottom of a mountain, it could be beside a stream, it could be, who knows? It doesn't matter. The geography doesn't matter. That really bothers a lot of people. And to me, it just says that's how, another reason we know this is fake. This whole GPS story is fake. But I thought I would bring up some, hi Tober. Whoa, I'm sorry. I thought I would just read some things from good old Forrest Fenn. Little step back in time, quotes from Forrest about beginning where warm waters halt. Okay? Just to remind us that this was not the figment of our imagination, that there was a GPS solve all along that was the real solution. So I'm going to read some answers that I got off Tarry Scant. Most of these are probably from Mysterious Writings, where Jenny Kyle's page, which is a great page, where, you know, and she's doing other things now, Jenny Kyle, I've noticed. Or I've kind of noticed, because I get her bulletins once in a while on one of the web pages I'm on. But, you know, she's looking at other things going on around the world and stuff, which makes sense. So a lot of these answers were probably on Tarry Scant, but a lot of them don't have the questions. So I'll just give you the answers, and it's always Forrest Fenn. Here's what Forrest Fenn said about how to find the treasure. You need to start at the beginning. You need to figure out where warm waters halt. Okay? You have to know where warm waters hold. You have to know where warm waters halt. I'm not talking to you, Tober. Don't get excited. You'll never find it that way. You need to start at the beginning. You need to figure out where warm waters halt. Fenn is not making this up, folks. Fenn is telling us about the first clue, a real geographical location. Hey, buddy, you want to go outside? Why don't you go outside? It's kind of warm out now. Just a second, folks. You want to go out? Come on.
Roger, there's troubleshooting. Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that fly. Dude, that's a drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots to the west. Look at that thing, dude.
Folks, we will continue on part 3.